ვიწყებთ ჩვენი ღონისძიების მეორე დღეს. როგორც მოგეხსენებათ, დღევანდელი დღე ეძღვნება კიბერუსაფრთხოებას და ინფორმაციულ უსაფრთხოებას. პირველი ნაწილი ეხება ინფორმაციულ უსაფრთხოებას, პირველი, ასე ვთქვათ, დღევანდელი სესია.
And the first part of our today's session begins with a very interesting presentation, and I think that speakers are very interesting. You know that Georgia is developing, and the most expensive asset is information for every organization, and this information should be protected and secured, and we in Georgia do have organizations who work on the security and protection of the data. You know that the data exchange agency is responsible for securing the information, except for the information that is classified and that belongs to the Ministry of Defense. As for the classified information, the Counterintelligence Department is responsible for it. That is under the Ministry of Interior, and Cybersecurity Bureau is responsible also for this such kind of classified information. Also, we have the Inspector of the Protection of Personal Data, and the responsibility of the inspector regulates the protection of and security of personal information, its delivery and so on. Nino Sarishvili, that is represents Personal Data Protection Inspectorate of Georgia, will talk about activities or the activities of the Personal Data Protection Inspector. She'll make an overview of that.
It is my pleasure to represent the Data Protection Agency of Georgia and talk to you about the major activities and the priorities of the activities that the Office of the Data Protection Inspector of Georgia carried out during the last year. Just to start with the brief background information, I'm sure that most of all are aware that we have the international framework. This is the Council of Europe Convention on the Protection of the Personal Data of the Individuals, and also the additional protocol about the supervisory authorities that was just recently ratified by the country. As regards the national legislative framework, the Personal Data Protection Law of Georgia was adopted and enacted in 2012. But the supervisory authority did not exist in the country till 2013, when in July the Personal Data Protection Inspector of Georgia was appointed and the office was formed shortly. Well, in fact, we have been operable for 1 year, but during this 1 year we had a lot of directions in our activities and were focused on developing the privacy-friendly environment in the country. As regards the basic functions that the Data Protection Authority of Georgia has, the first and the major function is to deal with the complaints of the individuals regarding the unlawful processing of the personal data, and also investigating the lawfulness of the data processing by the public and private authorities. As well, raising public awareness and consulting public and private organizations about how to adjust their systems to the privacy regulations is one of our directions as well. And raising public awareness and educating data controllers and data processors is the direction we're pursuing. Regarding the activities, as you know, the awareness in the country about the data protection, about the importance of the data protection, and about the meaning and the definition of the personal data is really low. In this regard, we have achieved good results because, for example, in last year, we have received only 2 citizen complaints, while this year we have already 22 of them, and most of the complaints concern the unlawful disclosure of the personal data, incorrect or inaccurate storage of the data. Also, the direct marketing spam SMSs related issue is really acute in Georgia, and the complaints we're receiving from the citizens are related to this issue, as well as illegal, unlawful processing of data when there is no legal ground for the processing of the personal data is an acute issue in Georgia as well. As regards the inspections, we have already inspected 18 agencies, but this relates only to the public agencies because law was not fully enacted towards private sector till November this year. And so during 2013, we were concentrated on the inspection of the public sector organizations. And as I have mentioned, we have inspected 18 agencies. Amongst them are the Ministry of Corrections and Probation, the Penitentiary Department of the same ministry, the Prosecution Service of Georgia, and mainly the Office of the Chief Prosecutor of Georgia, also Ministry of Internal Affairs, State Chancellery, and other ministries as well. Just to tell you briefly about the inspections, for example, in the Penitentiary Department, we have inspected the lawfulness of the audio and video monitoring services installed in the penitentiary establishments and in the cells, and we have issued numerous recommendations to the Penitentiary Department on how to improve their audio and video surveillance systems and how to comply with the privacy regulations we have in the country. In case of the Chief Prosecutor's Office of Georgia, the case was related to the unlawful disclosure of the sensitive data, of the medical data, and the office was received the numerous recommendations and received a fine as well, was imposed a fine. Also, another case about the Ministry of Corrections and Probation also related to the unlawful disclosure of the personal data, and the ministry was fined as well. As regards the consultations, taking into account that the privacy regulations are new to the country and taking into account that most of the public and private organizations strive to adapt their systems to these privacy regulations, we concentrated on providing assistance to these agencies on how to adjust their systems to the data protection regulations. And so far, we have conducted approximately 700 consultations to the public and private organizations and to the individuals as well. These consultations we're delivering can be received in a written or a verbal form, and most of the issues of the consultations related to the grounds of the data processing, to the legitimacy of data processing, to the accuracy of the data processing systems, electronic and digital systems they have, and also to the disclosure and transmit of the personal data to the third countries and to the international organizations. And as you see from the proportion, of course, as the figures show, the number of the verbal consultations is much higher than the written ones. During these consultations, we have participated in adjustment of the several systems to the privacy regulations, and amongst them is the surveillance system, audio-video monitoring system of the penitentiary establishment, also IDP refugee status holders electronic system, WorkNet, human resources management, electronic management system, and also HR.gov.g, that is the portal for the recruitment in the public sector. And we have participated in order to improve the system for them to become in compliance with the data protection law we have in the country. We have also participated in the review of the policy documents, and we supported the organizations to draft, elaborate, and develop the data protection policy documents. Amongst these organizations were public and private sector organizations, such as Ministry of Internal Affairs, Public Service Development Agency, British American Tobacco Company, and also microfinance organization Credo. In terms of the consultations regime, we have restricted access to the several databases, such as, for example, the access of the Tbilisi municipality to the database of the Social Service Agency, also access of the Georgian Post to the Civil Registry database, as well as we have restricted access of the mobile operators to the Civil Registry database, and as well as access of the Central Election Commission to the database of the citizens with disabilities. As you know, the law provides an obligations for all the organizations who process the personal data, and all of the organizations do process the personal data, to have the database filing system catalogs and to notify the inspector about this catalog. So far, we have received more than 4,000 database catalog notifications from more than 1,700 organizations, and amongst them the proportion of the public service organizations is pretty high. because in reality and in fact that the law was not fully applicable to the private sector till November this year. The private sector organizations were more relaxed and they did not all comply with this requirement. But since November 1, we have started to receive a high volume of file and database catalogs from the private organizations as well. Well, during 2014, we have been actively working on implementation of the data protection law, and in this respect, we were working on the elaboration of different recommendations and guidelines in order to support the organizations to implement the law. Among the guidelines that we have adopted is the guideline on the protection of the personal data in labor relationships. Protection of the personal data while conducting video and audio monitoring and using CCTV cameras. We have also elaborated the guidelines and recommendations about the direct marketing issue. And currently we are working on the specific recommendations for the insurance and banking sector on the protection of the medical data, and different sector-specific and thematic guidelines will come within a few months. We have also been concentrated on the trainings, on the awareness raising of the public sector and private sector employees, and to this end we are very actively cooperating with the several training centers, such as, for example, the Training Center of Justice, the Training Center of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Police Academy of MIA, and different private organizations as well, in order to deliver the trainings to all interested persons. We have developed a specific training, basic training manual, and developed sector-specific curriculums as well for the training delivery. And so far, we have trained more than 800 public officials and private sector representatives. And this number is increasingly high because we are conducting trainings almost every day, and we have a specifically designated staff member to this end who is in charge of organizing the trainings and delivering the ones. As regards the priorities that we had, and as I have mentioned, in light of the fact that the system is really new to the country, and we do acknowledge this fact, we have been more concentrated on the eradicating the systemic discrepancies that the organizations have, and on the assisting the public and private organizations to adapt their systems to the privacy regulations. We have been also concentrated on eradication of deep-rooted systemic problems and awareness raising of the public and private organizations. And we also tried to regulate the access to the different databases, because it is a common feature that the one organization holds a database, and most public and private organizations do have the access to this database. And one of the most simple example of this is the database of the civil registry. And we have just 1 month earlier conducted the inspection of the civil registry of the database they have. And we have issued numerous recommendations on how the access to this civil registry database should be regulated. And we have also been concentrated on providing balance between the data protection on the one hand and freedom of expression and freedom of information on another hand. And we have also been concentrated on promoting the privacy by design approach in order to implement the proactive measures, and in order to ensure that the new systems, the new processes that are developed and that are implemented are by default provide the privacy-friendly environment and are by default in line with the data protection regulations that are available in the country. Well, this was very briefly about the activities that our office had. Thank you for your kind attention, and feel free to ask any questions you have. Thank you.
If you have any questions, so please, you are free to ask them, because this is very urgent topic, Inspectorate on the personal data protection. Thank you very much. And Good morning. Georgi Gogashvili from the Silknet company. I have 3 questions for you, and all these questions are interrelated. First of all, I'd like to know what type of information is stored, gathered in your agency. How is your agency protected against dissemination and against and what system controls your inspectorate? Yes, you are the monitoring body, but your activities, are your activities transparent? Who monitors your activity? Thank you very much for your questions. They are very interesting ones. As the Personal Data Protection Inspectorate is an independent organization. It's not subject to the control. It's the inspector and inspectorate is accountable before the Parliament of Georgia, and our system is not subject to supervision except for the Parliament of Georgia. So what data do we gather in our inspectorate? We don't have any type of database. So we have the database about our own employees, and every agency, it's an HR base, nothing else. We don't have any other personal data about the citizens. When I mentioned this notification that we get from different agencies, so I meant it's only the notification and the general description of the databases that different agencies have, but they don't send us any kind of concrete information, any kind of specific information. We don't have any storage system. Who has access? If we conduct inspection, we don't have access to any type of data. We don't have unlimited access to these kinds of databases, but we inspect whether the databases are secured, whether the human rights are protected or upheld, and we also have access to the information when we conduct investigation of the processes of the treatment of data in different agencies and whether they are conducted pursuant to the law.